Hello students, this is Dr. Dakshayini, Assistant Professor from Department of Zoology, Maharani's Science College for Women, Bengaluru. Students, in this session, let us study and understand about anatomy of human brain under human anatomy. These are the contents. Human brain. It is the most complicated and highly specialized organ of the body. Yes, brain is an amazing 3-pound organ. Means an adult human brain weighs for about 1400 gram in weight. And it has a volume of about 1500 cc. Whereas in a newborn baby, it weighs for about 400 gram and it becomes double after 1 year. Brain is enclosed in a bony case called the cranium in the skull, and it protects the brain against external injury. Brain controls all the functions of the body, where it interprets the information from the outside world. It embodies the essence of mind and soul. Means it expresses the intrinsic characters of the mind and soul. Intelligence, creativity, emotion and memory are the main functions which are governed by the brain. Brain receives the information through our 5 sense organs. That is, the information is in the form of sight, smell, touch, taste and hearing. It assembles the messages in such a way that it gives the meaning for the information, and it can store the same information in the form of memory. Brain also controls the thoughts, memory and speech, and it also controls the movement of arms and legs. As a whole, brain controls all the functions of the brain, where it also brings very good coordination among the organ systems in the body. We know that human nervous system consists of 3 main divisions. One is the central nervous system, which is composed of brain and spinal cord. The peripheral nervous system, which is composed of cranial nerves and the spinal nerves. And the third one is the autonomic nervous system. It includes the sympathetic and parasympathetic nerves. Meninges. Meninges are the layers of the central nervous system. That means both brain and spinal cord are completely covered and protected by the 3 layers of tissues called the meninges. When you see the picture from outward to inward below the skull, it shows the presence of 3 layers. The outermost layer is called as the dura mater. It is a strong, thick membrane that closely lines the inner side of the skull. And this dura mater consists of 2 special folds. One is the falx, the other one is the tentorium. The falx separates the right and left hemispheres of the brain, whereas the tentorium separates the cerebrum from the cerebellum. The middle layer is called as the arachnoid matter. It is a thin web-like membrane that covers the entire brain, and it is made up of elastic tissue. There is a space between the dura mater and the arachnoid, and it is called as the subdural space. The innermost layer is called as the pia mater, where it hugs the surface of the brain, and it also follows the folds and grooves of the brain. And this layer is richly supplied by the blood vessels that reach deep into the brain. And there is a space between the pia mater and the arachnoid, and it is called as the subarachnoid space. Both the spaces, that is subdural space and the subarachnoid spaces, are filled with the lymphatic fluid called as the cerebrospinal fluid. And The cerebrospinal fluid not only flows between the subdural and subarachnoid spaces, but it is also found flowing in the ventricles of the brain. Cerebrospinal fluid plays a very important role where it nourishes the brain and spinal cord by supplying the nutrients as well as the oxygen, where it also acts as a shock absorbent. That means it absorbs the external shocks and it protects the brain and spinal cord by giving the cushion effect. Brain. As we know that brain is completely made up of nervous tissue, where brain shows two types of cells. One is the nerve cells, which are called as the neurons. The other one is the glia cells. Neurons are present having many sizes and shapes, but all the neurons will be consisting of its cell body, and it also has the dendrites and an axon. Neurons plays a very important role where it conveys the information in the form of electrical and chemical signals. And a neuron that is excited will transmit its energy to the neurons present within its vicinity. The other type of brain cells are called as the glia cells. In Greek, glia means glue. Glia cells they are the cells of the brain that provide the nourishment, protection and structural support to the brain, that is to the neural cells. Glia cells are about 10 to 50 times more than the nerve cells. And commonly, these are the cells are mainly involved in the development of brain tumors. Brain. Brain composed of three main divisions, that is three main parts. One is the forebrain, midbrain, and the third one is the hindbrain. You can have a look at the picture where it shows the three main divisions of the brain. Forebrain. It consists of three parts. One is the olfactory lobes, second one is the cerebral hemisphere and the diencephalon. Olfactory lobes. You can see the picture of ventral view of the brain where it shows the location of the olfactory lobes. Olfactory lobes are paired structures and they are present on the ventral side of the brain at the anterior region, and these are the center of smell. Olfactory lobes consists of an anterior club-shaped olfactory bulb and they are provided with posterior olfactory tract. In human brain, olfactory lobes are not that well significantly developed and they enclose the cavity called as the rhinocele. It is also not well marked. The second part of the forebrain is called as the cerebrum. Cerebrum is the largest part of the brain and it is occupying for about 2/3 of the entire brain. Means it constitutes for about 83% of the entire brain mass. The cerebrum is divided into two equal halves by a deep longitudinal median groove, which separates the entire cerebrum into right cerebral hemisphere and left cerebral hemisphere, and it forms the right side of the brain and left side of the brain. The two completely separated cerebral hemispheres are yet joined by a bundle of nerve fibers called the corpus callosum, where this corpus callosum plays a very important role in transmitting the messages to the cerebral hemispheres. Each cerebral hemisphere controls the opposite side of the body. That means if a stroke occurs on the right side of the brain, your left arm or the left leg may be weak or paralyzed. In general, left cerebral hemisphere controls the speech, comprehension, arithmetic and writing, whereas right cerebral hemisphere controls the creativity, spatial ability, artistic and musical skills. The slide shows the two cerebral hemispheres which are formed by the deep longitudinal median groove, and also the two cerebral hemispheres are interconnected by the corpus callosum, and each cerebral hemispheres controlling the opposite side of the body. Coming to the lobes of the brain. Each cerebral hemisphere has got distinctive fissures where these fissures cut or divide the each cerebral hemisphere into its lobes. And each cerebral hemisphere shows 4 lobes, and these lobes are named based on the position in the skull region. That is, near the frontal bone, it is called as the frontal lobe. Near the parietal region of the skull, it is called as the parietal bone. Near the occipital bone of the skull, it is the occipital lobe. Near the temporal region, it is called as the temporal lobe. And each lobe of the cerebral hemisphere is further divided into areas that serves very specific functions of the brain. When you see the functional aspects of the lobes of the cerebral hemisphere, the frontal lobe, this is the area responsible for human behavior, emotions and personality development. And it is also the area for decision making, planning, judgment and problem solving. It also controls the speech, speaking and writing. So the area is called as the Brachy's area, and it also controls the body movement, and the area is known as the motor strip, and it also responsible for the intelligence, concentration and self-awareness. The parietal lobe is the area where interpretation of the languages or the words takes place, and it also controls the sense of touch, pain, temperature, and this area is called as a sensory strip. And this area also interprets the signals from the vision, hearing, motor, sensory and memory, and it also receives the spatial and visual perception. Occipital lobe is the area where it interprets the vision, especially where it determines the color, light and movement of the information from the sight. Temporal region, where it is the area, it is responsible for understanding the language, and the area is called as the Wernicke's area, and it also stores the information in the form of memory, and it is also responsible for interpreting the messages from the ears, that is hearing, sequencing and organization. Cortex. The upper surface of the cerebrum is called as the cortex, where it shows the folded appearance, and it is in the form of hills and valleys. When you see the cross section of the cerebrum, it shows two distinct regions. The outermost region is called as the cortex, and the inner region is called as the medulla. The cortex is made up of for about 16 billion neurons, and these neurons are arranged in specific layers. And these neurons has certain grayish brown color. Hence, the cortex area is also known as the gray matter. Just beneath the cortex, it consists of a long nerve fibers, that is the axons of the nerve cells, which forms the white matter, where it plays a major role in connecting the different areas of the brain. The increased surface area of the cortex is thrown into number of foldings, where this folding gives rise to the gyrus and the sulcus. That means each fold of the cortex is called as the gyrus, and the groove between the two folds is called as the sulcus. In general, increased surface area of the cortex results in the increased number of foldings, where it determines the percentage of intelligence in a person. Coming to the deep structures of the brain, they are nothing but the pathways called the white matter tracks, where this white matter tracks connects the areas of the cortex to one another. As a result, the messages can travel from one gyrus to another, from one lobe to another, from one side of the brain to the other side. This picture shows the white matter tracks bringing the connection with the other areas of the cortex of the brain. Coming to the third part of the brain, it is called as the diencephalon, and this diencephalon shows the three parts. The dorsal part of the diencephalon is called as the epithalamus, and ventral part is called as the hypothalamus, and the lateral sides forms the thalamus. The dorsal surface of the diencephalon, which is called as the epithalamus, where it possesses the pineal gland, where this pineal gland is located just behind the diocele. This plays an important role where it regulates the circadian rhythms, means it controls the biological clocks by secreting the hormone called as the melatonin. The ventral side of the diencephalon, it is the hypothalamus. It is located at the floor of the diocele, where it controls the autonomic system, and it also controls the behaviors such as hunger, thirst, sleep, and sexual response. And it mainly regulates the body temperature, blood pressure, emotions, and also secretions of certain hormones. This hypothalamus, where it is also found attached with the pituitary gland by a stalk called as the pituitary stalk, and the pituitary gland is found in a small pocket of bone at the base of the skull, where it is known as the master gland of the body, where it controls the endocrine glands. It also secretes certain hormones which enhances the sexual development and promotes the bone and muscle growth, and also it responds to stress. The lateral sides of the diencephalon is called as the thalamus, where it mainly serves as a relay station for almost all the information that comes and goes to the cortex. The lateral sides of the thalamus, diencephalon, is the thalamus, which connects the two sides of the diencephalon, and it plays a role in pain sensation, attention, and alertness and memory. When you see this picture, around the thalamus, you also find the regions of basal ganglia as well as the limbic system. The basal ganglia is nothing but a group of subcortical nuclei, which includes the caudate, putamen, and globus pallidus, where it mainly controls the motor learning and it executes the functions and behavior. This subcortical nuclei work with the cerebellum to coordinate with the fine motions such as the fingertip movements. Limbic system is the center of emotions and learning as well as memory. This limbic system includes the hypothalamus, amygdala, and hippocampus. Hypothalamus regulates the blood glucose levels, controls the level of salts in the body, as well as it controls the blood pressure. Amygdala is the center to controls the emotional reactions such as aggression, eating, drinking, and sexual behavior. And the hippocampus plays a major role where it controls the emotions, learning, and mainly the memory. Coming to the second part of the brain, that is the midbrain. This midbrain mainly acts as a junction to relay the transmission of nerve impulses between the forebrain and the hindbrain, where this midbrain consists of number of tracts and the bundle of nerve fibers is called as the crura cerebri. And this crura cerebri is present on the ventral side of the brain, where it transmits the nerve impulses between the motor areas of the cerebral cortex to the spinal cord. Midbrain region shows the condition called as the corpora quadrigemina. Means it consists of 4 lobes. The anterior large 2 lobes are called as the superior colliculi, and they are the lobes responsible for the vision. The posterior small lobes are called as the inferior colliculi, where it receives the impulses to interpret the hearing. Some of the other functions that relay through the midbrain includes the reflexes for the head, eyes, and trunk, and responses to visual stimuli, and also the impulses for auditory stimuli. This picture shows the location of the midbrain. Coming to the third part of the brain, that is the hindbrain, which consists of the cerebellum and the brainstem. Cerebellum. It is also known as the little brain, where it is the second largest part of the brain, and it constitutes for about 11% of the brain mass. Cerebellum also shows the surface foldings, and this surface foldings also shows the greater number of neurons. When you see the picture, where the picture shows the position of the cerebellum, and where the cerebellum, the cross section of the cerebellum shows the 2 distinct regions. Outer region is called as the cerebellar cortex, and it is the gray matter, that is, it is composed of the cell bodies of the neurons, and center medulla, which is composed of the white matter. This white matter exhibits a branching or the tree-like structures in the white matter, and this is known as the arbor vitae. When you see the functional aspects of the cerebellum, it plays a major role in coordinating the muscular movements of the muscles. That is, it brings the muscular coordination and it regulates the body balance as well as body posture, and it also has found to play a role in language processing as well as recognition. The second main part of the hindbrain is the brainstem. It is the area at the base of the brain which lies between the deep structures of the cerebral hemispheres and the cervical spinal cord, where it mainly serves certain critical role, that it regulates the certain involuntary actions such as breathing, circulation, and the flow of gastric juices in the alimentary canal. This brainstem consists of two important parts. One is the pons orally, the other one is the medulla oblongata. This picture shows the location of the pons orally and the medulla oblongata, where the pons orally is located just opposite to the cerebellum. Pons orally is nothing but a bundle of a thick transverse nerve fibers, where it connects the two sides of the cerebellum, and it plays a major role in coordinating the muscle movements, the two sides of the body, and where the seventh cranial nerve which emerges out from this pons orally, and that is the facial nerve, which controls the expression of faces. The other part of the brainstem is the medulla oblongata, where it is the posterior most part of the brain, and this posterior most part of the brain, it continues as a spinal cord and it runs in the vertebral column. Medulla oblongata encloses the fourth ventricle called as the metacele, where the roof of this metacele is very thin and it is made up of non-nervous vascular tissue, and it forms the posterior choroid plexus, where it plays a major role in production of cerebrospinal fluid. Medulla oblongata mainly controls all the involuntary actions. That is, it controls the heartbeat, the respiration, that's breathing, and it also controls the flow of gastric juices in the stomach. It controls the swallowing, vomiting, salivation, and also choking. Medulla oblongata also acts as a pathway for conducting the nerve impulses from spinal nerves to the spinal cord and to the brain. This picture shows the presence of the brain ventricles and connection between the ventricles, and also it shows the flow of cerebrospinal fluid in the spaces, that is in the subdural and subarachnoid spaces, and also in the ventricles, where the lateral ventricles is found in the cerebral hemispheres. The third ventricle, called the diocele, it is found in the diencephalon, where these two ventricles are connected by the foramen of Monro, whereas the third ventricle is connected with the fourth ventricle through a connection called as the aqueduct of Sylvius. And this fourth ventricle continues as the central canal in the spinal cord. The cerebrospinal fluid flows in the spaces, that is in the subdural and subarachnoid spaces, and it also found flowing in the brain ventricles as well as in the spinal canal. Students, hope you could understand in detail about anatomy of human brain in this session. Let us briefly recall by answering few multiple choice questions. What is the weight of adult human brain? It weighs for about 1000 grams or 1200 grams or 1400 grams or none of these. The answer is C, that is an adult human brain weighs for about 1400 grams. Name the cells of the human brain. Is it the neurons or the glia cells, or both neurons as well as the glia cells, or none of these? Yes, the cells of the human brain is of both neurons as well as the glia cells. The brain constitutes for about 75% of the brain, or 83% of the brain, or 60% of the brain, or none of these. Yes, the cerebrum constitutes for about 83% of the brain. What is grey matter? Is it the nerve cell bodies, or the nerve cell axons, or both nerve cell bodies as well and nerve cell axons, or none of these? Answer is A. Grey matter is the nerve cell bodies. Brainstem is area at the base of the brain from cerebral hemispheres to the medulla oblongata, or is it area at the base of the cerebrum, or is it pons orally, or none of these? Brainstem in the brain is the area at the base of the brain from cerebral hemispheres to medulla oblongata. That is answer A. Students, these are the few references from the books and website. Thank you.